Hi, I want to talk to you now about how do you remember a story, right? You're noticing all these stories, you're finding great stories to tell, but how do you remember them so that they come to you off the top of your head, off the cuff, when you need to tell them, right? And I've got a simple tactic for you to do this. All you need to do is when you find a story that you really like and you want to add it to your repertoire, I want you to find someone, trusted colleague who you can share that story with and have a conversation about it. And in particular, I want you to talk about what the story means. So let me give you an example. A number of years ago, I did a project for the Victorian Bushfire Reconstruction and Recovery Authority, okay, VIBRA for short. And I had to organise with my colleagues a big workshop of 300 odd people. And we got the chairperson from the organisation to kick off the event. And I asked her name was Christine Nixer, I asked her, could you share a story? She'd been involved in the recovery of the fires that occurred in Victoria. Had a devastating impact on the state. And in the recovery, they broke the state up into 33 community recovery committees. And they had problems with these committees actually talking to one another. So this event was all about connecting them. And we thought we'd do that through story. So I said to Christine, is there a story that springs to mind? And she went, yeah, I've got one straight away. And she said to me that just a few days after the fires had occurred, a company, a spectacle company, people who make glasses like this, called OPSM, actually put caravans out in the fire-affected areas so that anyone had a problem with their eyes, or a spectacle broken or need to be fixed in any way, they could do that for them. Anyway, in this little town called Narberthong, there was an elderly couple who came up to the caravan, and the woman was complaining with grit in her eyes. And so they looked at it and cleaned her eyes out. All good. They turned to her husband and said, look, is there anything we can do for you? And he sort of went, look, I'm okay. I'm partially blind anyway because of diabetes, but nothing much you can do about that. And I said, oh, well, so when was the last time you got checked out by, by an ophthalmologist? And he sort of said, well, it's been about 7 years now. So, 7 years? No, that's way too long, they said. You need to be checked up more regularly than that because there's lots of technological innovations, lots of changes in how people are, sort of cared for. So they organised for him to go to an ophthalmologist, which he did. And it turned out his condition now had a better treatment. They could actually do some surgery that would actually return some of his sight. So he went and did the surgery, had his sight returned to him, and it was an amazing result. Now, as soon as I heard that story, I thought, wow, what a great story. I'll ring my colleague, Mark, who's my business partner, and I would tell him the story. And so this is what typically happens. I tell him the story, and then I say to him, okay, so what does that story mean for you? And the first thing he said was, Sean, for me, that means even in the shittiest situations, good things can happen. And we went, yeah, okay, that's a good one. And then I sort of said, well, it's great for corporates to get involved in these recovery efforts, when a whole region is affected by something like a bushfire. It's fabulous for OPSM to be involved in something like that. And then Mark shot back sort of saying, yeah, look, it sort of shows how, asking that extra question, showing that little extra bit of care can actually have phenomenal impact. Small things make a big difference. So we're having this conversation, and what we're doing is we're embedding why we would tell this story, right? Then I find that if I tell the story about 3 times, in relatively quick succession, maybe over the next 3 weeks, that story is locked in. And then this is the lovely thing, you forget about the story, and then let's say 3 months later, I'm in a conversation and someone says, yes, but can a small thing really make a big difference? You can sort of say, you just sort of pops into your mind. You can sort of say, look, actually, I had this experience with the bushfire recovery that really shows that it can make a big difference. And then you tell that story. It's fabulous. It's like magic. Now, there are some things in the story that are a bit harder to remember. Things like names. Names are always a bit harder to remember. So you sort of got to learn the names. Christine Nixon was a name I knew well. She used to be our police commissioner. So, it was a name that was well known to me. But Nabathong, that's a name that I'd never heard of. It's a bit different. It took me ages for that word to stick in my mind. But it adds another level of detail in your story, right? And that part makes it memorable and makes it credible for the listener. So that's how you remember a story. Find the story, tell it to someone, have a conversation about it, get it out there, at least told 3 times, and then you've got it in your mind. Now that's kind of like the organic approach to remembering a story. I want to now show you how you go about using a story bank, somewhere to store your stories so that you can review them as you go along.